Okay, I'm going to show y'all, and then I'm going to be presenting an informative speech about why we are fighting in the military-industrial complex. And I'm going to start by showing you a video just to get a gist of what I'm going to be talking about.
My fellow Americans, this evening I come to you with a message of leave-taking and farewell, and to share a few final thoughts with you, my countrymen. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development. Yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
You have to realize this is one of the great presidents, great military leaders, on his way out the door. At the end of his second term, he says, by the way, watch out for the military-industrial complex.
People know that he invented the phrase military-industrial complex, but very rarely do you see the whole thing and realize how utterly strident his warning was. I think it's one of the most profound statements ever made by an American president.
Just like George Washington gave his warnings about foreign entanglements and things like that, my dad was giving his warning against letting this military-industrial complex get out of hand.
We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
Okay, now let's go on with the presentation. Let me get the lamp. Okay, this presentation is about the military-industrial complex. It's about why we're fighting and the questions and concerns that come up when we talk about the military-industrial complex. That speech that you just saw, that was President Eisenhower's farewell address to the country, and he was pretty much warning us about the military-industrial complex. What is the military-industrial complex? It's a concept commonly used to refer to policy and monetary relationships between legislators, national armed forces, and the defense industrial base that supports them. In President Eisenhower's farewell address that we just saw, if you notice, he warns we must never let the weight of these combinations endanger our liberties or democratic processes. He invented this term. He also states we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Essentially, he's forewarning us about the consequences that we are dealing with today in the Iraq and Afghanistan war. When did the military-industrial complex rise? Going back to World War II, while all the Americans' allies were engaging in a bloodbath overseas, America remained quiet. What were we doing? On August 6, 1945, America completed what was known as the greatest mission in organized science. We were developing the nuclear bomb. The Enola Gay, a B-29 Superfortress bomber, became the first aircraft to drop an atomic bomb as a weapon of war. We dropped it, the first one on Hiroshima and then the second one on Nagasaki. The Enola Gay was built by Glenn L. Martin Corporation, known today as Lockheed Martin, which is the #1 defense corporation in the world. Lockheed Martin is an American global aerospace, defense, security, and advanced technology company with worldwide interests. It is one of the world's largest defense contractors. From a political standpoint, the U.S. was ending the war on communism. According to President Truman, it was America's way of showing off, and some say it demonstrated America's imperialism. What were the effects of the war? Well, since World War II, America's goal has been to maintain dominance in the world and possess the world's strongest military. This comes into America's imperialism. After the war, defense budgets doubled, and the president realized there was a need for a permanent military establishment. So is America a force for good or a force for imperialism? Just this month, 164 publicly reported defense contracts have been listed, totaling $6,740,000,000, $503,578. Today, the U.S. spends more on its defense than on any other parts of the federal budget combined. Who are the big players? Today's top 5 are Lockheed Martin Corporation, the Boeing Company, Northrop Grumman Corporation, the Raytheon Company, and General Dynamics. Essentially, it's competition, it's business. A lot of these corporations are indeed in it for themselves and the well-being of the countries they supply. I think the picture clearly explains it. In the documentary, I know y'all haven't seen it, but John McCain makes a good point. He says, priorities are set on what benefits the corporation, not what benefits the country. What have been the consequences and why are we fighting? I want to introduce you to a term, it's called blowback. It's the unintended consequences of foreign operations that were deliberately kept secret from the American people so that when retaliation comes, the public is not able to put it into context as to what is going on or why. So we come up with questions like, why did 9/11 happen? Why are we at war today? What are we fighting for? It began with Desert Storm, the conflicts that followed with Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden. America was sent to Saddam's aid, and when he invaded Kuwait, we were sent to Saudi Arabia. And Osama bin Laden didn't like that. He stated that he resented the Saudi Arabians because they requested American aid. And if you didn't know, Saudi Arabia has the largest reserves of oil. Iraq has the second. And at the time, Saddam was in charge of Iraq. So was this a direct cause for 9/11? After 9/11, there was a time when the world was behind us. But now we know that has changed. You have a lot of anti-military organizations, you have a lot of strikes, people are like anti-government. Well, it began sort of on March 19, 2003 in the opening strikes of, I'm sorry, that says Operation Freedom. It's Operation Iraqi Freedom. The U.S. had dropped 4 bombs on a select target where a bunch of Iraqi leaders were supposed to have been. It's called Dora Farms. Of those 4 bombs, 1 hit its target. And the majority killed during these attacks were civilians, housewives, innocent people, and hardly any military. During the first 6 months of the Iraqi war, 50 precision airstrikes were conducted against Iraqi leadership. Of these strikes, none hit its target. So it comes up with the question, has the military-industrial complex become invisible? Who is to blame? The military or the corporations? Because essentially they're lying to us. We're supposed to have new technology, and new technology is supposed to prevent, innocent people getting hurt. But that's not the case. So if these weapons are not doing what they were intended for, who is to blame? So what does the future hold? There is always the potential threat for corruption among the military, government, and private contractors. We must not let the military-industrial complex take control of the world's economy. The U.S. war in Iraq is a consequence of the military-industrial complex and everything President Eisenhower warned us about in his farewell speech to the American people. He said we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. And that completes my speech.